All right, Steeler fans, it is the Monday morning conversation. I teased this already before the break. I have Dave Schofield on. I know Dave Schofield's not going to be predicting the 53-man roster. We'll do that again, but not until closer to training camp. Dave's coming on because he wants to talk about, and I want to talk about, I should say I do as much as he does. We want to talk about the Steelers' compensatory picks potentially in 2026. Dave, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Jeff, it's nice to be back. If I had to find something for me to talk about, I'm like, hey, this is something that I've studied a lot over the years. So I'm like, anytime anyone needs anything with compensatory to break it down, just let me know.
And we're going to have some fun with Dave after we talk about the comp pick stuff. So stay tuned for that. So it's not just going to be all nerd stuff. So just be aware of that. All right.
It'll just be mostly nerd stuff.
Mostly nerd stuff. That's why I had to bring Dave on, because I'm not that guy. Not that I'm not a nerd. I'm not a nerd in my own way, but Dave's the numbers guy. I am not. He knows that. So, all right. So we're talking about the compensatory picks, and this is in line with how everyone seems to be focused on 2026. Everyone seems to be focused on that draft. And even when, and I think it all started when Omar Khan, God bless him, he said what no one thought he would say. And that is, yeah, we're trying to collect comp picks. So
we knew he was doing it. He just actually admitted it.
But he admitted it. Like most NFL GMs and front office people are not admitting.
Oh, we're just doing business as usual, trying to put the best lineup on the field for 2025.
So they're stockpiling these comp picks. Let's first talk about, for anyone out there that doesn't know the basics. Dave, explain the basics. So talk to them like they're in kindergarten and try to explain the compensatory picks. Players in, players out. Just start there.
Yes. Okay. So this is my wheelhouse because, when you teach high school physics, you're trying to take something difficult and explain it simply. So I love trying to do this. Hopefully I can succeed. Okay. The first thing that has to happen is a player has to be actually considered a compensatory free agent. So that's it. They call that a CFA, not Chick-fil-A, compensatory free agent. Okay. So if you ever see a notation of CFA, that means they count in the compensatory formula. In order to do that, it has to be a player who is on an expiring contract that it is the last year of that contract that it possibly could be. Now, not void years. If there are void years in there and a player, obviously doesn't play out those void years, when they're done at the end where they actually have a base salary, they would qualify as being a compensatory free agent. If it's a player who at some point in the contract, they negotiated a shorter contract, they are not a CFA. A great example of that this year, Stephon Diggs in Houston. He had, it was a trade, right? That he ended up there. However they got him. It was for multiple years. They redid the contract, knocked it down to just 1 year. He no longer counted as a compensatory free agent. So the Texans aren't gaining anything. The Patriots are not losing anything by them signing it. Also, if a player is released, that means they're not a compensatory free agents. No, it's got to be an unrestricted free agent. There was one other thing. Oh, if there's a team option for a year that the team does not pick up, then they're not a compensatory free agent because the team could have had them. It's meant to actually reward a team that loses someone that they don't want to lose, and that their only option would have been to tag them, to franchise tag them. So that's how that works. Plus, they have to be signed from when the league year begins, between then and the Monday following the draft. That was something that was new in the last collective bargaining agreement. It used to be, if you remember the whole thing with LJ Fort and Dante Moncrief, Fort was with the Eagles. They cut him. The Steelers had to cut Moncrief or else they weren't going to get the pick for Le'Veon Bell. That was because in the old system, they had a date in there that was basically the trade deadline. It was week 10. It was right around the same time. If you were released by then you didn't count. That date disappeared. Now there's some debate whether or not that the only date that's in the collective bargaining agreement, which is the Monday after the draft, is the date. That's what Over the Cap has, and they are the leading experts on compensatory stuff. If you're looking for anything that's what the picks might be, Over the Cap, they're the experts. That's the way they view it because it's the only date in the CBA. From where I've read the CBA, that's the way I understand it. So that's why that date was so important. So all players, even if they're cut now, if they were signed before the Monday following the draft and they qualified as a compensatory free agent, they then go into the formula.
All right. So that's interesting stuff, because those are obviously Dave just outlined, and I think did a great job, because I even learned something in this. What players could be compensatory free agents. Like, I didn't know if a team had a club option. I didn't know that if there were void years, that those are that they wouldn't fall into this formula.
Void years would count. Club option wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So interesting stuff there. So now let's talk about the Steelers situation heading into 2026. Players that the Steelers lose, how do they fall in line with this compensatory formula? What are the things really that Steeler fans are going to have to watch when it comes to players like James Daniels, Dan Moore, Najee Harris, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, those 5 in particular? Go ahead and run that down for all the listeners out there. What are we going to have to pay attention to?
Okay. So before we get specifically to the Steelers, let's talk about how the Steelers are eligible, because bottom line is, it doesn't matter how big of a contract a player signs if you don't have a net loss. And what I mean by that is, did you lose more CFAs than you gained? Doesn't matter the value. Now, if there is not 32 compensatory picks awarded for a draft, if there wasn't even teams where there was 32 picks eligible, trust me, there's even been years where there were a lot more and they weren't awarded. Normally what they would do is, if you have the 32, if they only award 30, the next 2 just go to the next 2 players that would have drafted at the beginning of what would have been round 8. But if another thing they can do is they could award a net loss 7th round pick. Like, if you lost 2 players that were considered 3rd round and you gained 2 players that were 7th round, that's a big net loss. So therefore you could be a team that could be awarded that. That's been done rarely, but it has happened. But I got to talk about the round stuff, don't I, Jeff? Because I just mentioned it, so you have to understand how this works. Okay. So when a player is considered to be a compensatory free agent, they go into this formula to be canceled out or not. But in order to figure out where they rank, every player that finishes the season on an NFL roster goes into this formula. So what they do, and the 3 things that it all comes down to, is it's a point system, and you are inversely ranked by your contract's average per year over the contract that you signed, of everybody. Not even, like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, they're all the guys that are at the top of this list, because it's every NFL player. So what they do is they rank every player, the top. Let's say there's 1975. I'll just throw that number out there. That's how many players there are. The number 1 would get 1975 points. Number 2 would get 1974, and so on, so on. So it all depends on how many players they have where that falls in. So they rank them there. That's the number 1 thing. The number 2 thing that counts into it is there's some bonuses with snaps played and postseason awards. And we'll talk about them in a little bit, because those are the things that we still don't know for this coming year. But the way it works is the top 5% of all those players, you take all those players ranked, the top 5% are considered 3rd round players, 5 to 10% are 4th round players, 10 to 15% are 5th round players, 15 to 25, that's when they jump it a little bit, 10 more percent in there, are 6th round, and 25 to 35% of those players are 4th round picks. So if you're not in the top 35%, you don't qualify as a compensatory free agent, even if you were eligible to be one. So if it's a league minimum deal, that's like half the league. That's more than half the league. So that's why it's only the top 35 that you would have to fall into in order to actually qualify for a round. Okay. So I feel like I'm talking a lot. Do you have any questions before I jump into what this means for the Steelers this year?
A lot of that stuff I knew. So this is it's a good refresher. So let's now dive into Steelers specific stuff.
Okay. So the way that the 2 other things work that you have to look for Steelers players this year is you gain more points based on the number of snaps you play in the next season, just that next season. So if you play more than 25% of your snaps as an offensive or defensive player. There's a different formula for kickers. I don't actually know what that is. I've never had to worry about it, so I really don't know what it is, because I haven't found anywhere that's actually told me. It's based on like a statistical performance stuff. I don't know exactly what statistics. I'm sure it's like for kickers, it's probably accuracy, and putters, it's probably net yards.
Boswell's not going anywhere. Who cares?
Yeah. So, but I mean, he's on this list based on where but he's not someone that actually qualifies as this. So so what it is for every percentage of snap that you play, if it's more than 25%, that's additional points you get. If you play 70% of the snaps that next season, then you get 70 more points awarded to where you fell salary wise. So the salary is what really puts you in the range of where you are, but the number of snaps played is where it kind of adjusts it a little bit. You're not going to have someone who's a 6th round compensatory pick and based on their, estimated and based on their snaps, they jump to a 3rd. The snaps, the most you can gain is 100. So that's where that falls into it. Plus, if you make all pro, you get an extra 20 points. If you make all conference, that's through the Pro Football Writers of America. They do an all conference team. You could get 5 points. Now, if you got the all pro, you don't also get the all conference. So you could get 5 or 20 bonus points there. So that's how it sits. And as I said before, Over the Cap does a phenomenal job of just trying to track all of this. They did this before the last CBA, where they actually outlined how this worked. This used to be a complete mystery. It wasn't even laid out in the CBA. And Over the Cap had it figured out. And they do estimations, but part of their estimation is they estimate what percentage of snaps every player plays. So when you look at the Steelers right now, the big one is Dan Moore. So let's look at Dan Moore. Dan Moore is estimated to be a 3rd round pick because of his contract. What was he? Just like 20.5 average, I think is what it was.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was 80 million.
Yeah, it was a big one. Oh, actually Over the Cap even has it was 21 million. Okay. But they have him estimated as playing 94% of the snaps. Now, he played more than that every year with the Steelers.
He's just got to stay healthy.
He's got to stay healthy. If he drops probably below around 70% of the snaps, he's going to fall from round 3 to around 4.
Yeah.
So Steelers fans, you want to see Dan Moore out there on the field in order for him to say, and I say drop, where these borders are going to change when everything's all said and done at the end of the year. We should know as soon as the season's over, you should have a much better idea of what the estimates are. And even then they can still be off a little bit. But Dan Moore, he needs to play. Justin Fields, he's the next one for the Steelers. He's estimated to be a 4th round pick. Their snaps for him is 63%.
That's low.
Because the question is he going to be the starter all year? If
they didn't draft a quarterback.
No,
I think Tyrod Taylor's the only other quarterback on their roster.
So you want to see Justin Fields on the field a lot for the Jets. As long as he's 63%, he's good. Honestly, if he goes over 90, he could maybe move up to a 3.
Ooh, I'm intrigued.
Yes. So there's no exact number in there because how it fluctuates with everybody. There could be a bunch of players that were ahead of Justin Fields that they also went well above what their snaps were expected to be. So it's not an exact science at this point because no one's played a snap. So Justin Fields, he's one. If I recall correctly when I did this article, I don't know that he could drop to a 5. But he could, even if he dropped below 25% of the snaps, I think his salary has him there that he would at least be a 4. There would have to be some crazy other stuff going on. So he's pretty safe for possibly a 3. Dan Moore is a 3. Can't go any higher than 3, but he could drop to a 4 if something happens where he doesn't play. Okay. Russell Wilson is the crazy one.
What's the percentage of snaps for him?
Okay. Here's what's crazy. The percentage of snaps for Russell Wilson is 78%.
Oh, he's not hitting that.
See, I think Fields is going to play more, and Wilson is going to play less.
Totally agree with that.
Wilson right now is a 5th round pick, but he could really fluctuate because so much of his salary this year is incentives. And if he hits those incentives, then that counts towards his average per year salary.
Yeah. So
Russell Wilson could actually get up to a 4, but he would have to win he's got incentives based on games that they win, then he started a quarterback, playoff games. So, I mean, if the Giants go 17-0 and win the Super Bowl with Russell Wilson playing 100% of the snaps, he could actually move pretty high, but the likelihood of that, not so much. So the thing is that he's pretty much locked in at the bottom of what he could do salary wise, just not snap wise. So he could fall to a 6.
Yeah. So you got to think about that quarterback situation they have in New York. So you have Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, and everyone's going to focus on Jackson Dart.
Yeah.
And you have to also think about Brian Daboll and the pressure on him to have to perform. So let's assume that the Giants struggle with Russell Wilson at the helm. How fast until he says, I got to get Dart on the field because he's my ticket to keeping my job. And that could impact all of this stuff. So again, keep tabs on that.
So he's a really big wild card, but I would say the most likely path is he'll probably stay about where he is. He'll probably stay there as a 5th rounder. If you made me had to pick, guess right now what I think would happen, that's what I would say.
Okay.
But the Steelers have 3 other players that are 6th round compensatory value right now. James Daniels is a 6th rounder. He's more towards the top of that 6th round, and they have him estimated at 76% of the snaps in Miami. Now, that's probably because he didn't play, he played a game and part of a game last year. So if he goes up into the 90s, he could start tinkering with a 5th round pick.
Okay.
Then there's Dante Jackson. He's also a 6th round pick. They have him at 65% of the snaps. He's probably pretty safe there unless he doesn't play this year. If his snaps drop below 25%, he could drop to a 7th. But at that point, the Steelers wouldn't even be getting a pick for him because you can only get 4 compensatory picks based on players lost. I mean, because they also have the whole thing with diversity with the coaching and GM hires. Those are separate. They don't count towards the 32 that they issue for players lost. So you can only get 4. So Dante Jackson, he's more of a safety net, and he's pretty far behind James Daniels, so it's probably not him. And then honestly, the other one is Najee Harris as a 6th round pick. He's actually the 6th player listed for the Steelers as a compensatory pick, and they have him at 63% of the snaps, and that might be tough. But he's another one that's got some incentives in his contract too. But the draft, I think, kind of hurt him a little bit. So,
all right. So let's go ahead. Go ahead. No. What you're saying.
No, I was going to say, because those are the players that don't get canceled right now, according to Over the Cap, because the Steelers lost 2 more 7th round picks in Elandon Roberts. They have him at 52%, and Mike Williams as a 7th. They have him as 47%. The Steelers gained 2 7th rounders in Mason Rudolph and Malik Harrison. The problem with them is they have both of them under 25% of the snaps. So they have Malik Harrison at 21% and Mason Rudolph at 23% of the snaps. I think Mason Rudolph's either going to get a whole bunch of snaps this year or not very many at all.
I agree.
Don't you think that's safe to say?
Yeah.
But the Steelers have kind of foolproof this enough that if the NFL gave more than 4 picks, they could have been eligible right now. It looks like they could have as many as 6. So even if Harrison and Rudolph bump up around each one of them, they would just cancel other players that were around higher. Because the one thing I didn't explain there is when you cancel players out, when you look at that net loss, like the Steelers lost of qualifying ones. Oh my goodness, I got to count them. 4, that's 6. They lost 8. They gained 2 right now, the way it stands. So that means you have a net of 6. But to figure out which rounds you would have, you match players of the same round and cross them out. So Harrison and Rudolph are 7th round picks. Roberts and Williams are 7th round picks. That's where they cross. If, let's say, Harrison goes up to a 6th rounder, you would cross a 6 and a 7, but you're still only taking the top 4. If you don't have matching rounds, then you start from the basically from the bottom. Because let's say you gained 3 7s and lost 2 3s, your 3s are going to cancel the bottom 2 7s, and then the other one's what's left. The one last thing about that is the Steelers have 2 players that are actually not qualifying right now as CFAs that are close because of their salary. And the one that's really close is Brandon Eccles. And his snap total is estimated as 29%. If he goes up to like 60%, he's possibly going to move up in there. But the Steelers have a buffer.
Right.
Okay. The other one is Daniel Ekuale, based on his salary, the defensive lineman. And I know it's going to be tough for defensive linemen. First, he's got to make the team, let alone, get that number of snaps. Yeah. They have him as 27%. That's probably not going to be that far off.
Okay. So to sum all this up,
before
we have some fun with the rapid fire segment with Dave, to sum all this up, the Steelers could be, there's a lot of criteria that have to be met before we actually talk about finite terms here and picks. A 3rd, a 4th, or 2, a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th, correct?
The way it sits right now, based on over the cap's estimation, it's a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th. And that's what lots of Steelers fans are thinking. It could be, well, let's not go crazy with Russell Wilson, all right? Let's not, because he's a huge wild card with all this, but because it's potentially, but I really don't think that's realistic. But Justin Fields moving up to a 3rd round is not crazy. It could be 2/3, a 5th and a 6th. It could be 2/3. It could be 2/3 and 2/5 if James Daniels plays like 97, 98% of the snaps. It could be that good. Or it could be Dan Moore falls to a 4. Justin Fields stays at a 4. You could have 2 4s. Russell Wilson is nowhere close to that snap percentage, doesn't hit his other incentives. He drops to a 6. They could have I would say the worst they could do is 2 4s and 2 6s. Now, I could tell the story of how compensatory picks can disappear really fast if you want me to take 90 seconds to do that.
Do it in 90 seconds.
Okay. This was the year. It was the last time that the Steelers had got a compensatory draft pick, and that was for Bud Dupree. They were set up for 3. It looked like before the season started. Then they traded for Akello Witherspoon. And when you trade a player, you take their compensatory status with that player. So because he was a compensatory free agent, when they traded for him, he still counted. That took away a 5th round pick. So they were thinking it was going to be a 3, a 5, and a 7. And then going into the last week of the season, do you remember Jesse Davis?
Yeah.
Offensive tackle? Yeah. Dan Moore gets hurt. And Jesse Davis goes from having around 14% of the snaps for the season, plays every snap the final week of the season, puts him at 26%. That adds 26 points to him. And someone who wouldn't have qualified bumps into the 7th round, cancels the 7th round pick. And Bud Dupree gets hurt, hardly plays enough snaps. He drops from a 3rd to a 4th. So instead of a 3, a 5, and a 7, the Steelers got a 4.
It's crazy. So if you're
it can change.
People that want to know, Jeff's take on this is that when a player leaves the Steelers, they're dead to me.
Yeah.
I am going to be tracking how they do. So I'm going to hope that Russell Wilson plays well enough to keep the job in New York until like delays Jackson Dart playing for a while. Okay, good. I don't care if he succeeds, but I want him to play. Justin Fields, dead to me. Hope you play along a lot of games this year.
But you don't need him to succeed. You just need him to be on the field.
You just need him to play.
Yes.
Just play well enough.
He can go 0-17 and play 90% of the snaps, and he's going to help out the Steelers.
All right, Dave. So I wanted to finish this up, and I didn't tell you about this because I thought let's have some fun. I wanted to ask you a bunch of Steelers questions that are geared not from the comp pick formula, but just your own fan experience and your own time of being a fan. Okay. So I just recently wrote a letter from the editor yesterday, Sunday, for steelcurtainnetwork.com. And I talked about the team that got me hooked. And it was the 1994 Pittsburgh Steelers. I talked about how I was born in 1983. Clearly, that means I'm a child of the 90s, And so when I was cognizant and aware of everything. So let's start with you, Dave. We're doing this rapid fire style. It's something I do on my golf podcast, actually. So you can take your time, but we don't want to spend too much time on any one question. We got 10 of these. You ready?
Okay. Can I tell you something though? No, because you said you were a child of the 90s. People have to understand. I was coming of age in the 90s. High school and college for me was all in the 90s.
So for me, I was at 2000s, early 2000s for that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's do rapid fire. Let's start off with Dave. The same question for you is the question I answered from a letter from the editor. What team, the Steelers, was there a Steelers team that got you hooked on the team? Like a team that you just always remember, it was very fond in your memories?
Okay. I was a Steelers fan, but because I was born in 1978, I never got to experience the Super Bowls. And to me, that was Steelers history. The teams I liked always stunk. Mark Malone was the quarterback, Bubby Brister, so I watched the Steelers. I wanted them to win. I'd play with my toys laying on the living room floor, watching while my dad had the Steelers games on. So I was a Steelers fan, but the one that really got me hooked was actually, I would say, the 95 team that went to the Super Bowl. That was my senior year of high school. That's what really, 92 was, with Cower Power first coming in, that was pretty good. But 95 really, really had it more than anything.
All right. Next question. What are your thoughts on fan expression? I say this because I was watching some clips from a Pirates game the other day. Actually, Brett Kiesel posted it. He was in a box and he just scanned and there was no one there. And there's a lot of fans that have said, we're not going to pay anything. We're not going to give them any of our money. This team it's poorly run. And we saw Steelers fans putting out things like billboards in the city of Pittsburgh. What's your thoughts on fan expression one way or the other?
I think the NFL as a whole is less susceptible to that because there's so few games compared to baseball, basketball, hockey. Baseball is twice as much. As those other two, because there's so few games, there's always going to be that demand. So you can express your frustrations, but I don't know that it's going to damage affect the team as much as it would in other sports.
Okay. Who is your favorite Steeler of all time?
Troy Polamalu.
Oh, wow. I thought for sure you were going to say Levon Kirkland for some reason. I don't know.
Really?
You talk fondly of. All right, very good.
Yeah. Trust me. There's coming up with the Mount Rushmore top 5 is a little bit trickier, but yeah.
Okay. What was your first jersey?
My first Steelers jersey?
Yes, first Steelers jersey, not Mike Allstott.
Yeah, because you knew the answer to the other one. Yeah, that's right. My first Steelers jersey was Ben Roethlisberger.
Okay. What was your first Steelers game you attended?
The first game I attended was the day after Christmas in 2004, Ben Roethlisberger's rookie season. They were hosting the Ravens. My wife, we had just gotten married. We got married in 2003, so it was our second Christmas together. And she didn't even let anyone in my family know. I had 2 tickets to the game. That was the next day in the pocket of a jacket that she got me. No, it wasn't a Steelers jacket that I was going, and that was my first game. That's awesome. For the Steelers.
Yeah. Okay, this is, as a season ticket holder, this is an interesting question. What are the worst conditions you've ever watched a game in? I think back to Brian Davis going to the Sunday night game against Dallas that was delayed because of thunderstorms, and he got absolutely drenched. Have you had any of those issues? What's the worst conditions you've ever watched a game?
Okay, well, it was really cold, that playoff game against Miami. The whole Bud Dupree killing Matt Moore game. Yeah. That one was cold, but I was still all right. It's funny. The Jacksonville playoff game, I was so thrown off because I couldn't take the Clipper. There was flooding. The Clipper couldn't run. It was, the whole river was flooded. We took the train over from there. And I get on the train. I realized I left my coat in the car. So that one was interesting. But honestly, there's been some hot ones that aren't great. The worst hot one I was actually at wasn't in Pittsburgh, it was in Washington. But honestly, I have to admit the worst one had to be the twice delayed, poured on, huddled with the wind whipping out in the concourse where we had to evacuate the stadium against Arizona. That was the only time I considered leaving a game early.
And so it wasn't the cuddle fest that you and Brian Davis
had?
Oh,
that wasn't because of temperature. That was because of space. That was a space issue. Because the lady sitting next to me was the lady they were not pleasant. So I had to get as far away from them as I could.
I get it. All right. Next question. We have 3 more. What is the most memorable game that you've been to? Maybe you've already talked about it, but is there one that tops it?
Well, that first game was super memorable because, the Steelers wrapped up the number 1 seed in that game. But honestly, I would say a lot of good memories. The first game I went to, it was a long time between games there. The first game I went to with my dad, that was in 2013. That was 2 years before I was a season ticket holder, against the Lions when they wore the Bumblebees. And Antonio Brown. My dad's he will go to his grave believing that Antonio Brown was pointing at me, and that's because I was wearing the Bumblebee jersey. I'm holding it up, only 10 rows up, and he looks right at me and points. And I actually have a picture of that from other places. That one was really memorable. Some of the ones that are memorable are for bad reasons. Sometimes the losses can stick with you worse. But I was also at the 17-10 game against the Patriots that Joe Hayden got the interception.
I remember that.
That one was memorable. A lot of the times my memories, a lot has to do with the game, but it also has to do with the people that I'm with. So I say to people all the time, go with someone that you want to enjoy a game with. Go with a loved one or whatever. That's what makes it as much of anything.
All right. 2 more. The next one is an easy one. Depending on what you like, what you prefer. I've always been an offense guy. I've just I like scoring. I like offense. Doesn't mean I don't like defense, but I always prefer offense. What do you prefer, offense or defense?
Blocking. So I'm going offense, but I like the more like run blocking, the schematics of that part of it, both from the little bit that I played and as a coach. That's what I like. I like run offense, which is kind of surprising for people that like offense.
Well, it's funny because the X Factor article we do before every game, I always do offense, you do defense.
Because you always take offense.
That's because I like the offense. All right.
Yeah, I let you do your thing, and I have no problem looking at defense.
All right, this is a tough one to finish it up. Better Super Bowl 40 or 43?
Oh,
the last one, the last question.
Do I have to give you a Dave answer?
You can't give a Dave answer
because they're both. You could pick one or the other for either reason. I'm going to tell you my biggest struggle, because the reason I would pick 40 is because I never thought I was going to watch the Steelers win another Super Bowl, because I never saw the first 4 in the first. I just never, it was something that happened every year that I was never, rarely a part of. They only played in one that I know in my lifetime. So to break that streak and win that game and that whole run was amazing. But the game itself of 43 with some of those most amazing Super Bowl plays you've ever seen was exciting as well. But I think but those are my arguments for each. But I think I'm going to have to go with 40, just because to me, finally getting that one for the thumb, that just meant so much to me, because it covered so much of my Steelers fandom to then finally get to that point. That there was a long time of being a Steelers fan that didn't get to enjoy 4 Super Bowls to finally get to have one.
All right, man. There you go. Rapid fire. We wrap it up. Thanks for your time, Dave. Do you want to plug anything?
Yeah, go to steelcurdnetwork.com. You'll see mine and Jeff's name all over the place.
There you go.
Doing all we can there to give you the best content possible. I am one of the ride or die crew. I've never missed an episode. So as much as I do for Steel Curd Network, both on the podcast and written side, whenever I get to be on Let's Ride, it really is an honor.
Well, I always appreciate having you, Dave. Thanks for your time, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.